Outside the Box Reviews. We're taking a look at the Figma figure 209, and this is Indiana Jones. And when this figure came out, I was vaguely aware that it was being released. It's another import figure. Up to this point, I'd never picked up anything from Figma, though I have been tempted by some of their cooler looking releases like the Guyver and Samus. But not long ago, I watched the whole Indiana Jones trilogy again for the first time in quite a while, and it made me really want to add an Indiana Jones action figure to my collection. And my original thought was to go and try to customize one of the Han Solos from the Black series and transform it into my own custom Indy. But after a quick look online, I remembered that Figma had put this out, and a further look into it showed me that not too many people had reviewed it, so all the more reason to pick it up and take a look at it. So is this figure fortune and glory, or am I going to want to rip its heart out and set it on fire? Let's take a look. Now, my main source of import figure is usually SH Monster Arts, and anybody familiar with Bandai's line will recognize this style of stand. Figma is a little different. They have a hexagonal shaped base. It's kind of a frosted plastic. Figma there kind of raised up in the plastic. You see the copyright through it. But the arm itself is very familiar looking. It really looks a lot like what you'd get from Tamashii Nations, and it does unpeg. It's not the exact same kind of peg hole size that we got with those, but same idea where you peg it into the base, it will swivel. And then we have the joints that have a screw built into them, so you could tighten them up if you need to. The clear stand, we got another one in the middle, one up here at the top. And it comes with this piece on here that's actually kind of an angled off section, but I realized you could actually pop that off, and there's a straight pin right inside there, so depending on how you want it plugged into your figure, you can kind of customize it. I really don't see too much difference between using either option, outside that this gives you maybe about a 1/4 inch more to play with. Indy has a hole here on the back of his jacket, and either one of those pegs will just peg right in there. Makes a very nice secure connection, and then you can have Indy on the stand. He stands just fine on his own, but this will actually help you keep him upright, or you could have him in more dynamic jumping positions or falling positions or what have you. And Indy comes with just about every accessory you'd expect him to. Here we have his iconic whip, very cool looking. You see all the little details in there, the little knotted end to it. It has a great paint job to it. It's mostly a dark brown plastic, but we have these light brown highlights to kind of accentuate it. And then there's actually articulation points throughout, so you can twist it here at the very end and about midway through, so you can rotate these pieces around and kind of create your own shape to the whip as he's moving it. I do wish they hadn't done this curve here. This kind of seems to negate the larger curve up here. It kind of leaves a kinked look to the whip if you have it posed the wrong way. And here at the bottom we have the handle, which he holds decently, is a special hand for it. And then the end here actually does pop off, so you could slide it in that hand. The only problem is this doesn't stay on particularly well, and it's very, very small, so I'm very afraid this is going to get lost. But beyond just that piece, we get a coiled up whip. Same kind of detail to it, very nicely done. Same paint job, same everything. And then here on Indy's side, he has a little clip, so we could take that whip and clip it right in there. And then once you kind of put his satchel and jacket back over it, you don't see the clip very well, so you just have the whip sticking off the side of his belt, very much like it does in the movie. We also get his revolver, which is really nicely detailed. And this is almost Hot Toys level paint quality in my opinion. Everything's very nicely done, all the little silver bits. The reason I say Hot Toys level is because I'm convinced looking at it that it looks like I could pull that hammer back. It looks like I could slide the cartridge out and put more bullets in it. It's just so nicely done for such a very, very tiny accessory. It's just amazing. It's very, very cool. He does have a special hand to hold this, but he does not have a place for it on his belt. He has the holster, but the holster remains closed at all times. So whether he had it in there or not, it doesn't really matter. And then we get a phenomenal assortment of treasures from Indy's adventures. So here we have the fertility idol from Raiders of the Lost Ark. Very nicely done, a beautiful gold plastic, very nicely detailed. It's kind of the woman there. You could see the weird little baby coming out between her legs. Very strange design for this statue. It apparently was based off of real fertility idols. Really, really well sculpted, beautifully detailed. And as you saw at the beginning of this video, he is able to hold this as well. It's a little hard to get into his hand, but once you have him holding it, it works out just fine. Then here, this is not a Tylenol, this is one of the Sankara stones, and I'm less enamored with this piece. It's really not quite as cool looking. Now, of course, it is by itself, so it makes sense that it's going to be this dull red color with the white lines in it. But to me, the iconic version of this is when they're all together and they're glowing. So I almost would have rather had like a translucent amber colored plastic just in this shape. But like I said, it's just one by itself, so it wouldn't be glowing anyway. So I'd probably be bitching if it was a glowing design. But this works just fine. It's just very underwhelming. It is flatter on the bottom and rounded at the top, just like the actual prop in the film. And last but not least, we have the cup of a carpenter. This is the Holy Grail. Very nicely done, looking very worn. Lots of great paint apps on here. Looks very, very similar to how it did in the film. Very nicely done piece. The head sculpt on Indy, from certain angles, I feel like it looks like Harrison Ford. From other angles, I see George W. Bush. I see Leonard Nimoy. So it's not a perfect head sculpt. It actually is probably my least favorite feature of this figure, which is disappointing. I think it's just a little too round, and I think if they added some stubble in there, given that more kind of grizzled look, would have worked a lot better for me. But overall, the flesh tone is nicely done. There's some different colors in there, making him look not completely clean, but he's not super dirty. Got his eyes in there, which I believe are the wrong color, because these are very blue. I think Harrison Ford has darker eyes than that, if I remember right. His hair is nicely detailed as well. A little bit of paint wash in there to bring out the details. The trademark Indy hat. Also some great paint going on, making it look very dirty, very worn. The high area is kind of wiped clean, but the low area is very, very filthy. The hat is removable, but it's not removable so that you get Indy's hair underneath. It's removable for a gimmick that I really don't understand. If you take it off, of course, you see Indy's top of his head is very, very strange looking, and I'm not really sure why this back piece is red, but you get the real freaky part. You pop the front of Indy's head off, and that's just creepy on its own, and then you get something straight out of Beetlejuice, just a pair of eyes floating in the air. Now those eyes are removable. The first time I've ever had a figure with removable eyes. And then there is a second set of eyes that you could pop in there. You could put Indy's face back on and put his hat back on. And his eyes are looking slightly to the side. It's so negligible of a change that I really don't understand why they included this gimmick. In my mind, I would have much rather had the ability to take the hat off or have a secondary head so we could have a hatless Indy. This eye gimmick just does absolutely nothing for me and adds a piece to the figure that I'm going to be constantly worried is going to get lost somewhere. Coming down to body, it is very nicely detailed. He has his leather jacket here, which is a dark brown with some of the same light brown highlights we got on the whip, but really, really nicely done. All kinds of great sculpted wrinkles and the collar and everything. It's a softer rubber piece. It is detracted from a little bit by the hole in the back, especially because on mine it's shifted enough where you can see a little bit of the shirt underneath, but nothing horrible there. Even coming down here, I thought this might have been some excess plastic when I first touched it, but then I realized it's actually a sculpted part of the jacket. We get his pocket down there. So very, very nicely done piece. Sleeves, very wrinkly as well. Kind of an odd disc in there for his elbow joint, but it's not super distracting. Then we get his hand, really nicely done. More of that same kind of paint wash over the top of it that we saw on the face to give it a little bit of a dirtied look. Though I really wish they would have kind of put some more grime on his fingernails just to kind of make him look a little more like he's been out doing stuff. But this is his whip holding hand. You can see it has a very tight grip. On the other side, we have more of his open hand, which I used to grab the idol with. But Indy comes with a bunch more hands on its own little fancy little hand-holding mechanism. It's a little piece of plastic here. We got the Figma logo. Really like this. I wish more companies would do this, especially Hot Toys. I'd really like to see Hot Toys implement something like this. But we do get a left and right hand that's a pure fist. We get two semi-open hands here. We get another whip holding hand, so he does have left and right for that, as well as the wide open gripping hand. We have left and right. Then we have a right trigger finger. And then we have this other right hand, which I think is more for holding the stone or the grail. But all have a great paint job to them. They're very consistent looking. My only gripe is that when they attach to the figure, they peg in and they don't slide in all the way, and some of them have a loose fit, so they do kind of slide in and out a little easier than I'd like them to. Underneath that jacket, of course, we have his undershirt. Not fully detailed out just because the jacket's covering it almost all the time. But has some more great sculpt and paint apps to it, looking very dirty and worn. His satchel comes around his shoulder. Now this is actually sculpted to the upper section of the body and it's softer rubber coming down, but very nicely sculpted as well. It's always going to be stuck under the jacket, but they did a great job on it. We got two belts here, one holding his pants up, other holding up his whip and holster. The holster looks very nice, very well detailed. Coming down to his pants, this section here is actually kind of more rubbery, similar to a NECA figure. Some more great sculpted detail here in the pants. Very nice and wrinkly and dirty coming down to the shoes. Shoes also very nicely done. It's very cool looking boots. And an interesting thing to note, the sculpt on the back is a little more broken up. This figure's really not meant to be looked at from behind, between the hole in the back of his shirt and these gaps up here behind his knee. But when you get to articulation, it's all going to pan out. And for a size comparison, here's Indy next to Han Solo. So we get two different sizes here of Harrison Ford. And it's kind of a shame that Indy is the scale it's in. Now, when I bought the figure off Amazon, it was listed as a non-scale figure, so I kind of knew what I was getting. But he is so close to being a 6-inch figure that he's not going to fit in with anything else you probably own, except maybe some other Figma figures. And he's not quite tall enough to live with his other Lucasfilm pals. However, playing with all the accessories and articulation on this figure, and then just trying to get Han Solo to stand next to him, really glad I didn't try to make that custom, because I don't think I could do anything that would live up to what Figma's provided in terms of sculpt, paint, and articulation. This figure leaves me incredibly torn. Not about whether I'm going to recommend it. This thing actually does get a very high recommend, but it's just kind of who I would recommend it to. And I guess the answer is people who are really big on import figures. Maybe not quite the import figures I'm biggest into, which would be the Monster Arts figures, but maybe stuff more like the Figuarts figures and other Figma releases and Reveltech and all those really cool import figure makers who do human or humanoid figures. And I think a lot of them are in this scale. Unfortunately, I've sold my SH Figuarts figures, well, besides Mario, but he doesn't really fit into scale with anybody anyway. So I really can't do a comparison of how he would stack up next to Goku or anybody like that. But I would think he's probably close enough. Maybe not exactly. Maybe it's the same difference we're going to see between him and Han Solo. But maybe that would work really well. If you're a big Marvel Legends or Star Wars Black Series collector, and you want something to go in with those figures, this is going to disappoint you just because it's not in scale enough. But outside of that scale, I love everything else about this figure. The sculpting is spot on everywhere but the face, and that is Harrison Ford from some angles, and just not entirely Harrison Ford. But his accessories look great. Paint apps are superb. I love how dirty they made him look, how grimy, specifically his hat. His hat is the piece I keep going back to because it really does just look like it's covered in dirt. A lot of companies can make a figure look dirty, but what Figma's done here is to include little bits of clean areas that would happen in real life just from the dirt getting brushed off in specific sections. That really just makes me believe the paint app so much more than a normal figure. And there are things I can nitpick on this figure further, but they're minor. This figure is so enjoyable, and I know I'm going to spend a lot of time posing this figure in all kinds of crazy poses and different situations. And you know what? With some good photography tricks, you could probably make him fit in with whatever you wanted him to, if you just kind of play with some forced perspective. So Indy here, it's a very strong recommend. As far as I'm aware, this figure has been out a little while. I don't know of any plans from Figma to make more Indies or any more characters from the series, and I don't feel like they really need to. They made a semi-definitive Indy with this version, but I kind of would like a Temple of Doom version where he's missing the leather jacket and it's a little more torn up. I feel like that's really unlikely, but I'd like to see it. And in the same breath, having compared him so much to the Black Series, I'm sure Hasbro probably couldn't support an entire Indiana Jones 6-inch Black Series figure line, but maybe some kind of exclusive that they make available to the general public or something that's a very similar figure, just done in a more Hasbro-ish style. I'd be totally down for that. So make sure you check me out on Instagram, username Outside the Box Reviews. I'm sure I'll be taking plenty of pictures of this guy. Also check me out on Facebook, link below. And until next time, this has been our Outside the Box Reviews. Stay tuned for more to come.